Welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host today, Shantae Charles. Normally, I would just be on IG and on Spotify doing my recording, but I am also on YouTube today because I feel like this particular episode um, is important. It's important to have. This is Theology Thursday in our Daring Dialogue uh, schedule of events. And I thought it would be good to discuss a podcast or streaming show that came out on yesterday by Club Shay Shay, Shannon Sharp being the host, and his interviewee, Monique. Now, I have talked a little bit about his previous interview with Cat Williams and also his interview with Kirk Franklin. I just kind of shared on those just a little bit. But this particular one, I want to dive into a little bit. So, we're kind of in this book, but not in this book today. So, we aren't going to be reading Esau Macaulay's Reading While Black, but we are still talking about what Esau Macaulay was talking about, ironically, and that is slavery. And I also want to bring up this book here, which we'll be doing hopefully um, in a little while, possibly before this season is out. We will start this. If not, we will start it at the beginning of next season. Failures of forgiveness, what we get wrong and how to do better. I think that this is a work that is needed right now and for its time. Before we get into the conversation though about Monique, I am going to give us some Black History trivia since this is Black History Month. And the trivia question today is, when was the initial civil rights legislation passed? Was it passed in 1964, 1957, 1961, or 1962? Put your answer in the comments and I will share the answer at the end. I also want to read from Who Did It First? And let us find our icon today. Our icon today, and we seem to keep coming back to her for different reasons, is Aretha Franklin. Now, we did some reading on her, I think last season or earlier this season. We did a little bit of reading on Aretha Franklin. We got to know a little bit more about her life. But what was she the first of? She was the first woman, believe it or not, to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Music changes and I'm going to change right along with it, she says. One Sunday morning at New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan, 10-year-old Aretha Franklin stood up to sing. Her father was the pastor, and gospel music had been a part of her life since birth. Aretha understood that the best singers let emotions power their songs, and when she sang her solo, everyone in the congregation was moved to their feet. Aretha moved to New York City when she was 18 years old to pursue a music career. Her career began to take off in 1966 when she signed a deal with Atlantic Records. The company was known at the time for a music genre known as soul, a blend of gospel and R&B. Good morning. After releasing her first hit single, Never Loved a Man the Way That I Love You, Aretha covered an Otis Redding song called Respect. She sang the lyrics with so much emotion, Respect became an instant hit when it was released in April 1967. Aretha's commanding delivery struck a chord with an entire generation of Americans who were fighting for civil rights and protesting the Vietnam War. President Barack Obama once said, American history wells up when Aretha sings. Throughout her long career, she had more than 100 singles on the Billboard charts and received 18 Grammy Awards. In 1987, Aretha was the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, solidifying her status as one of the most powerful voices in music. Who did it first? Aretha Franklin. All right, let's hop into this hot topic. I am not going to go into a whole lot of detail because I know some people have not seen Monique's interview that was done with Shannon Sharp. But I am going to, I would say, point out some principles of things that she talks about in there. So if you have not watched the podcast interview, it is 2 hours and 55 minutes long. It is long, but in my opinion, it was worth watching. And we saw the numbers climb. Like when we started watching it, I think it was like around 8 o'clock last night. And at 8 o'clock last night, it had like 927,000 views. By the time we were done watching, it had like 2.1 or 2.2 million views. Did you hear me? Yeah. And I'm quite sure it's higher than that right now. Here's the first thing I want to say about Monique's story, okay? Because in that time, Shannon Sharp did a very good job of letting her speak. It is worth it. If you are an artist of any kind, it is worth you going to hear what Monique has to say about the industry, especially if you plan on being in the industry. If you're planning on packing up your bags and moving out to LA because you feel an unction and a call to go be a part of Hollywood, you need to go watch that video. You need to go watch that video. I don't care if you don't like Monique or you don't like her personality. You need to go watch that video if you plan on going to LA and you plan on going to Hollywood. Now, there are already some people out there that we know that are genuinely good people. They're Southern people. They have Southern charm. I think about people like Kevon Stage, excuse me, and Tabitha Brown, Fantasia Barrino, just kind of salt of the earth people that you can tell they have a very a kindness and a genuineness about them. And we want to make sure that those kind of people that go out to LA and go out to Hollywood with their dreams continue to be able to have that kind of genuineness about them and not get screwed over when they go out there. Okay? So Monique gives, in my opinion, some very good nuggets that have to do with the business of Hollywood and the business of industry. Um, she talks about her life. She talks about her childhood. She talks about her disconnection, which ironically, somebody really needs to send her a set of Nidra Tawwab's books. Number one, Drama Free and Setting Boundaries. I think she would actually really benefit from reading those two books, because a lot of what she discussed had to do with setting boundaries with your family and why she's disconnected from her family. So, again, I'm not going to share her story. You can go and watch it. But a lot of people, and I saw very quickly why those numbers are rising, because a lot of people can identify with Monique's story. A lot of people can resonate with how her life has gone. Let me give you some principles of what I got out of what Monique was saying. Okay. One of the things she talked about was doing people dirty in private and expecting them to put on a good front publicly after you continue to do them dirty in private. I don't know about you, but I've experienced that in my life repeatedly from people that I respected, from people that I thought had my back, sometimes from family members who have done very underhanded things that has caused me to lose out sometimes financially and on opportunities, which is kind of one of the things that Monique discusses in detail. And one of the things that Shannon Sharp said that I thought was, important, he said, you can't tell someone how long to grieve. And grief is not just about someone dying. Grief can be the loss of your career, Grief can be the loss of your opportunities. So when people hear grief, they think it's just about somebody life being taken, but your life can be taken in so many other ways. Your life can be taken from you in so many other ways. There's so many people out here who are still walking around, but they're grieving the losses that they've been taking in life. They're grieving the L's that they've been taking in life. And a lot of times those L's have been facilitated by people they loved, by people they admired. And they're grieving that. And usually, when those people are tied to your family, there's not a whole lot of recourse, unless you're planning on suing your family members. There's not a whole lot of recourse that you can really deal with in that. And she talks about that dynamic very, very specifically. But there's lots of people that have been done dirty in private and expected to put on a good front, or expected to go to the family cookout, or expected to go to the family reunion, or expected to sit at the same table with the person that cost you something. And that person is unrepentant. They don't think they were wrong. They're not trying to recompense you. They're not trying to apologize. They're not trying to say, what can I do to make this right? And everybody thinks you're supposed to move on. And another thing Shannon Sharp said that I thought was absolutely right. It's easy for you to say, let it go, when you're not the one who lost something. Some people lost time they can't get back. Some people lost money. Some people lost opportunity. And so you don't really have a right to tell people to let it go when you're not on the losing end. Because 9 times out of 10, when it's you that has suffered the loss, then you want everybody to be on your side. You want to take it to court. You want people to hear you out. And so I don't understand this telling people they need to be quiet and they don't need to speak about the pain that they're in. That's how we wind up with professors that unalive themselves and then leave y'all a 3 or 4 page note to detail all the ways in which she had been harmed, but she didn't feel like she could come out and tell people the harm and the grievances that were being done to her. So at some point, we have to stop hearing about people's story on the back end when they're no longer here, to know that someone was willing to listen to them and that someone cared. This culture, this underbelly culture of doing people dirty in private and expecting them to put on a good front publicly, needs to stop. That's basically what they're saying. And it's not just Monique saying it, it's other people saying it, but Monique tends to be louder. Okay. The other thing she pointed out was several instances where she felt undermined and sabotaged. Now, I am keeping in mind that this is her side of the story. If anyone wants to come out and refute her side of the story, they have their own side to tell. But she talked about undermining and sabotaging. Let me give you an example of undermining and sabotaging. Okay. My husband does phenomenal photography. He will never tell you about the ways in which he has been undermined and sabotaged. But because I am his wife, I'm going to tell you about it. Because here's the thing, and also, again, this is a conversation within her interview. Here's the thing about when you have a spouse versus a person that's kind of fighting these things by themselves. Your spouse goes through the stuff with you. Your spouse gets to see how people sabotage and undermine you. Hello, Jay-Z and Beyonce. Your spouse gets to see the nitty-gritty of what is going on. And sometimes your spouse want to clock people, but you've told them, don't say nothing. I got this. I'm going to handle this. But that spouse is going through whatever is happening as well. They may not be directly experiencing it, but they're indirectly experiencing it. So when you tell people not to take on my husband's photography services because he's a little expensive, you're undermining him, you're undermining our finances, and you're undermining our household. That's just one example. And that has happened more than once by people who say they are for you. Well, how are you for me if you're telling people to use somebody else because you think I'm too expensive? And the person uses someone else and does not get the same quality. And then they want to come to us and complain about the quality that they got. But you listened to someone else's advice that told you to use somebody else who was less experienced, did not know what they were doing, did this as a hobby versus a profession, and you got what you paid for. So now don't come over here thinking that you're going to pay us what you paid them. That's a form of undermining. When people point other people away from your business to someone else, knowing that that person is going to get a lesser and lower quality and they're going to wind up having to come back to you anyway, that's a form of undermining. That's a form of sabotage. But it happens, okay? One of the things that I saw in what she was saying, and she does not say this, but this was the conclusion that I came to from what she was saying. And that is, why do we have to see people broken in order to know that there is an issue going on? Why did we have to see Taraji P. Henson, a really, really excellent actress, why do we have to see her broken? Why do we have to see her in tears when she should have been celebrating the completion of a project, which is what artists usually do? They usually are happy and excited that their work is now going to be coming into the world and it's going to be, displayed for all to see. But we didn't get that from her. We got a trail of tears. That's what we got from Taraji. To the point where you realize that there had to be conversations happening in the background saying, hey, you got to tone this down a little bit because it is overpowering this film coming out. It's going to hurt your sales because all we're hearing about is how poorly you all were treated during the production process. And it took Taraji almost every place that she was doing a talking about how well she has not been paid, talking about how she was getting ready to retire from acting because essentially it wasn't panning out to be what she thought it was going to be. She even said it took the joy out of her performing as an artist. These were her words. So the question is, why does it have to get that bad and people to be broken publicly in front of you for you to understand that there is something wrong? And like I said a couple of years back, when Monique first began kind of really talking about this and advocating for fair pay and all of that, people were like, she don't need to talk about this. She's not that good. Da, 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 da. There are very few people that actually have the awards and accolades that Monique has when you consider the whole entire field. Okay? So that led into a discussion about who is the right messenger. Do we favor some messengers over other messengers? If the messenger is lighter complexion, or if the messenger has tears, do we hear that better than somebody who is darker complexioned, who is plus size and who has an unflinching face and refuses to cry while they're telling you the exact same thing. That's a community issue that we need to have a real conversation on. Okay. She also pointed this out. And again, these are my takeaways based on what she was saying. Okay. I'm not giving you what she's saying, but these are my takeaways. She made a point of pointing out something I thought was very, very interesting, that the trans and gay community are better at making things right, i.e., reconciling, i.e., admitting where you are wrong, than the so-called people who say they know God or who are throwing God's name up all the time in everything that they do. She made a point of saying that if you are friends with someone and you know they've done someone else wrong, and you are willing to keep that information to yourself, she did not feel that that was a righteous thing to do. And I'm going to tell you, I agree with her. I agree with her. That's why before people start talking about, I got something to tell you and I don't want you to tell nobody else, I need to ask you a few questions. Is what you're about to tell me about to make me an accomplice to a crime or implicate me in something I don't want to be implicated in? Because if it is, please keep that information to yourself. Do not tell me. Okay? I'm a part of two professions. One, I'm a licensed elder and leader. And two, I'm a licensed educator. Both of those professions are mandatory reporters. So don't be telling me about no crime you did commit or you finna commit. Go and confess to the authorities and get it right. All right? So I do agree with her on that you shouldn't be allowing people to just unload on you stuff that they're doing that they know is not right to other people, and them expecting you to keep that information. Especially if you're a person that if you see something wrong, you want to tell it and make sure that it gets made right. Because what that does is that violates your own boundary and that violates your own conscience. There are a lot of people who leave this earth before time because they have been filled and stacked with other people's dirty little secrets. It's not even their own, but they're carrying the burden of other people's dirt. And other people's dirt has buried them before their time. I don't plan on letting that be me. And I hope you don't plan on letting that be you. All right? So there's this whole idea of what is the better messenger? Somebody who is, who has pretty tears, or someone who is unflinching and maybe not as standardly attractive as someone else? Do we tend to give our ear to the more attractive messenger rather than just receiving the truth for what it is? She also talked about gatekeepers. And I want to posit it this way, because I have actually been paying attention to this a little bit for a minute. She was talking about the gatekeepers, namely white gatekeepers that run Black careers or that oversee Black careers or big names that essentially tell these big name people that they're overseeing to sort of disassociate with their community or disassociate with Black people. Now, this is not just including entertainment industry. Martin Luther King, in his work, if people read it, actually talked about this, but he talked about it from the political standpoint that sometimes the people that come along and endorse you as a Black person, as a grassroots Black person, they endorse you and then they start pulling you away from your community to the point where you're so disconnected from the needs of your community that your community no longer trusts you to elect you. he talks about this and he warns about it. Okay? People that I can think of in the recent news that were complaining about not being invited. For example, Lenny Kravitz, who is related to me by marriage. That's another show. Lenny Kravitz began to complain that he wasn't being invited to black shows, and black people in the industry had to come out and say, Lenny, that ain't us. We love you. We've always loved you. Let me tell you what it is, Lenny. Your publicists and your agents and all these people around you, when we say we want to have you to come or we want to interview you, they block it. They block it. So here you are feeling like your people don't really love you. And here your people are trying to reach out to you. And there's a middleman that is blocking them from reaching you. So that means you got to fix who your team is, because they are what? Disconnecting you from your people. And there were people that came out on Twitter and said, we have reached out and we've not heard an answer. We've tried to get an interview and we've not heard an answer. So hopefully he is working that out. Let me tell you about when I read last night, directly after I watched this interview. Tabitha Brown. Tabitha Brown she's on her new book tour, and I have her other 2 books, but she's on her new book tour. I Did a New Thing. And she was told by her team, and I'm like, I want to know who these teams are. She was told by her team that people in Jackson, Mississippi are not really checking for her like that. She was told that Jackson is not a marketable spot to go to. And she said in a very long post that I shared on Black Table Talk, she shared that she said to them, I just didn't feel that because the Lord had told me to go to Jackson. So she said she took to her own social media, which these people are going to have to do in order to connect to their audience. She took to her own social media and put out a call to say, hey, is there any interest for me to come to Jackson? And she got tons of responses back. Well, guess what? She went with what the Lord told her and not with what her team told her. And she went to Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson State University received her. The Sonic Boom came out to greet her. And she had thousands of people at that book signing that supported her work. People could learn from her. You have to stay connected to your base. Stay connected to your audience. I don't care if your audience is 2 people. Know your audience and stay connected. That is what makes Tabitha Brown, Kevon Stage, that is what makes them very powerful right now, because they are staying connected to their audience, their original audience, not the audience that their team is trying to craft for them. They're staying connected to their actual audience of people who supported them from the go. All right, a couple more things, and then I'm going to open it up for conversation. The other thing that I noted in not just Monique's interview, but also in Cat Williams' interview, is there is a dichotomy that is expected or played out. I'll say it that way. That's played out when it comes to the industry. You could either be a very popular, well-known slave to the industry, or you can be an unpopular owner of your own rights. And the sooner that you are an owner of your name, of your image, of your likeness, of your trademarks, of your copyrights. The sooner you're an owner, it might grind certain people's gears, but the reality is you are in a better position to control your life. So, for example, people looked at Tracy Chapman, who is one of my favorite guitarists of all time. People look at Tracy Chapman performing with Luke Combs at the Grammys. And, people are like, oh, why does he have to be up there? Why does he have to be up there? Da, da, da. I'm like, listen, Tracy is not worried, okay? Tracy owns the publishing rights to her song. She is very protective. I don't know if people know this, but over the years, she has actually refused people being able to cover certain of her songs. So for her to have Luke Combs cover her song, he had to get permission. Okay? So that didn't happen just under her nose and all of a sudden he just covered her song. No. He had to get permission, which means she allowed it. Okay? And then it put her song back into some #1 rotations and all of that. And she got another award, right? Because he chose to give his rendition of her song. So she's not upset about that. She getting her coin because she is a owner. She owns her rights. As Cat Williams said, he's done 12 Netflix specials or 12 comedy specials, and he owns them all. But the point was made that as long as you work for people for free, and I'm going to take this not just from industry, but in the religious sector as well. As long as you are working for people for free, as long as you are working yourself to the grind for free, as long as you are not charging for all of your hard work, gifts, skills, talents, abilities, everything, as long as you do it for free, you will be the friend of everyone. You will get accolades. You will be told how amazing you are. But when it costs, and when you say, I'm not working for free, people will begin to label you and say you are difficult. People will begin to label you and say you cost too much. And then they will go pay somebody else twice what they were willing to pay you for mediocre, horrifically bad work. I have seen it. I ain't calling no names yet. I'll put it in my memoir. They are willing to go spend crazy amounts of money on mediocre work, and they refuse to pay you because you are holding them to a standard of excellence. And if you're in business and you are excellent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You name your price, people tell you they ain't got it. But then you'll see the people who said, I ain't got it, wearing something that's 10 times more than what they could have paid you to get work done. That was excellent. That was going to last longer than they red bottoms. Okay? So I've seen it myself. I have seen it. So people want you to be a slave to whatever they're doing. They'll make you popular. They'll call your name. They'll talk about how such an amazing and sweet and kind person you are as long as you're working for free. They will put your name up and say, oh, it was just so wonderful having them here. And then they paid you in fried chicken and collard greens and potato salad. And then when you say, I need to be able to live and provide for my family, that's when people begin to label you as difficult. Mind you, if they were in your shoes, they would be asking for compensation. But when you ask for compensation for your work, all of a sudden it's a problem. Okay? So you have a choice to make. That's what she was really getting at. Do you want to be a popular slave to industry and have people tacking things onto your contracts that you didn't sign up for, that they are unwilling to pay for? Or do you want to be unpopular and own your rights? I'm not talking. Let me see if I got one of my things here. I'm not talking about what I don't know. Okay? Let me show you. You see what that says? That says Library of Congress. Why? Because I own the rights to my work. You know what this says? Library of Congress. Why? Because I own the rights to my work. You know what this says? Library of Congress. Why? Because I own the rights to my work. I own the rights to my music. I own the rights to my books. I own my literary rights. So if you want to do a movie, you got to come through me. If you want to use my music in your film, you have to come through me. And this is why some of us are not liked. Because you're not finna play the radio with us. We own our stuff. Okay? All right. Exactly. Thank you. Late payments, no payments, excuses about payments, all of that stuff. In business, you have to deal with it. In business, you have to negotiate. I had to do some negotiating recently. The person could not pay me my asking price. I said, well, if you can't pay me my asking price, then I need to be able to bring goods, products, and services and make up for the part that you can't pay. Because what I'm not doing is I'm not doing it for free. So you got to be willing to negotiate. You got to be able to say, this is what it is. And if you can't meet that, then I need you to let's negotiate a way to supplement what you can't do. And I'm going to treat this as me donating part of my time because I'm getting a write-off. Okay? So I'm going to recoup it back some way or another. But what we not finna do is tell me this is all I could give you when I know that we can negotiate something better that works for you and that works for me. Okay? I will give you one quote that Monique said directly, and I thought this was very powerful. She said, because of my resume, because of the work I've already put in, because I have earned the highest possible award you can get in acting, which is an Oscar, and she's correct. I don't do auditions. I only do offers. What am I auditioning for when you have my body of work to go look at, to go see if you want to have me for this opportunity? So she made a point of saying, I only do offers. I don't do auditions. Auditions are for people who are untried. I've done auditions, okay? And I will still do auditions because I don't have those accolades, okay? So depending on your professional experience, if you're an amateur, you're an amateur. If you're an apprentice, you're an apprentice. If you're a master at your craft, and people should respect that. And we should have that. There shouldn't be this whole thing of I don't have to respect you, but you must respect me. We got to get that out of our community as a whole. We really do. If you are a master in this, I need to respect that. When I am working on producing music, okay, I get on my keyboard and I start composing with notes. I am not a master at musical instruments. I am not a keyboardist. I am not a pianist. But I can hear music. I can tell you the instrumentation I'm using. I can tell you the sounds that should go with it. I can I musically arrange. I arrange my own vocals. I arrange my own background vocals. All of the background voices you hear in my music are mine. I don't have background singers. It'd be nice to have some. I'm not there yet. All right. But that doesn't stop me from doing my own arrangements. So when I take my rough draft of my composition and I give it to my producer and I tell them I need these strings, I want drums, I want this here, I want that here, this is how I want it orchestrated, and they turn it back over to me with an invoice, I don't shortchange people. You can ask anybody who has worked with me in business, in music, or otherwise. I do not shortchange people. I do not nickel and dime people. I do not hem and haw and try to get people's price down. Their price is what their price is. And if I cannot afford it, I will be upfront and say, I cannot afford you, but I will circle back when I can because I respect your gift and your craft too much to ask you to discount it. When people tell me what their price is, I pay their full price. I do not negotiate them down. Why? Because I respect the price that they set. Period. Now, they're offering a family and friends discount or something like that up front. That's great. But if they don't offer me a discount, I'm not going to ask for one. That's how I do business. I can't talk about how other people do business. I can only talk about how I do business. So if you tell me what it is, then I either can pay it in full or I'll say, hey, let's set up a payment arrangement and I will faithfully pay you on time or early. Why? Because I'm in business and I know that bill cycles roll around and we have accounts payable and accounts receivable and stuff has to be paid on time. So I'm not trying to make anybody else's life hard because I don't pay on time. I want to pay you on time on the date you specify or earlier. Why? Because that's how I do business. I wish everybody did business that way, but everybody does not do business that way. Okay? So there are some people I will never go to again and ask them to do zero zip for me because they do not do business well. Again, I ain't naming names. I'll leave that for my memoir. Now, one last thing, and I do realize I'm going over time, and it's okay today. One last thing. After that broadcast aired last night, D.L. Hughley got on his IG and he began to go off on the aspect that she shared about him. He mentioned things that were not in her interview. He mentioned things that were supposedly resolved with her talking about his daughter's intimate assault. And I do remember Monique coming out and saying, I was wrong. I should not have brought her into this, and I apologize. I remember her doing that. So his rant last night was about that. But in her interview, Monique began to detail why she attacked him in the first place. And she began to talk about how her coming on his show, being asked something inappropriate, having her spouse disrespected and brought into an inappropriate question, and how she felt disrespected by that. No, he did not air the show. He says on his broadcast last night, he did not air the show out of respect for her. That wasn't Monique's point. Monique's point was, you should have never had staff asking an inappropriate question. That was her point. Her point was not about whether or not he aired the show. Her point was she came to him and told him about the question that she was asked, that it was disrespectful and dishonoring to her marriage relationship. She asked why they would ask that kind of question, And instead of him apologizing and saying, I apologize for what you were asked, I realize it was inappropriate. No, he said, this is how we do it here. This is just what we do. So he never apologized for the question that was asked. He didn't see it as disrespectful. And according to what I listened to last night, because I listened to what he said, he still doesn't realize that that is why she is upset. He still doesn't realize that the fact that he didn't think it was an issue, that they were giving her this question, is her problem. So another thing, we got to listen to each other and hear what each other is saying. She's saying, this is my family. My husband is my family. I don't have good relations with my immediate family. So you disrespected the person that has been helping me, that's been helping me to grow, that's been helping me to go become a better person. This is my only family right now. And you are putting my only family in something like this to ask me on air on a radio station. She felt disrespected that they would even ask her that question. He doesn't see a problem with the question. He's like, this is what we do here. And therefore, there's still tension there because he never apologized, because he didn't think he did anything wrong. And he doesn't think his staff did anything wrong. All right. So when you get to that part of the interview and you hear that, just understand she is explaining why she went on their, I guess, the show that they were headlining or doing the comedy show together. That is why she went off on him on the stage. She didn't say it was right. She's explaining why she did it. They need to work that out. That's all I'm going to say. Last thing I want to say. There is a difference between honest and right. There is a difference between honest and right. Here's an honest statement. I went over there and cussed her out last night. That's an honest statement. You're telling what happened and you're being transparent about it. I went over there. I cussed her out last night. I was angry. I wanted to just throw her in the trash. That's an honest statement. Just because it's honest doesn't mean it's right. So we're hearing a lot of honesty and transparency, right? But we still have to run it through the filter of, is it right? It might be honest, but is it right? It might be honest. I'm telling you how I really feel, but is it right? Because right means I have to separate out how I feel about something versus, is this the way that I should go? And so I think when you listen to her interview, you're going to hear her say some honest things and you're going to hear her say some right things. So don't get the two confused. Okay? All right. That is all I had to share today. I know I gave y'all an earful. Hello. Hello, Lady Judesta. Yes. All right. Any questions? I tried to pull out some of the things that I saw that was really important that were notated in her interview as opposed to giving you word for word of what she said. Okay? And as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's not just civil rights, people. When we see unjust things happening, or when we see unjust things happening amongst our friends and our families, and we kind of stay quiet, or we demand that people not talk about it, or we say, just get over it, or it's been years, I don't understand why you're still talking about it, because somebody said, oh, she's stuck in her story. Wouldn't you be stuck in your story too? Just go listen Go listen. I would be stuck in parts of my story too if I feel like I can't get closure. And in many instances for her, she feels like she can't get closure and she can't move on. Now, she can go to therapy and her therapist can help her with how to move on without an apology. How to move on when people won't apologize, how to move on when people won't take accountability, because there are some people who are never going to take accountability for the harm that they have rendered to other people. We just know that. But don't allow your life to be paralyzed by people's inability to admit and acknowledge where they have gone wrong. Don't allow people to hold you hostage to, I'm waiting on an apology. I'm waiting on an apology. You may never get it. And again, that may take you through a whole other grief process. Grieving the fact that you may never get an apology that you deserved. And I wish I could say that everybody's going to get one, but we know too many people who have been what? Posthumously apologized to, posthumously awarded medals they should have gotten when they were living. Yeah. All this posthumously stuff that people didn't live to see. So I encourage you, if you have done wrong to people and you know you have done wrong to people and you have just not opened up your mouth to admit to them that you've done wrong, can you go ahead and do that, please? So they don't have to posthumously receive your apology, or you're standing over them at a casket saying, you know, I really should have told you I was sorry, but I didn't. Or you're trying to give part of a eulogy and you realize I really shouldn't be up here talking about how wonderful this person was because I didn't treat them wonderfully when they were alive. I talked about them in disparaging ways. I undermined them. I spoke down about them. I spoke disparagingly about them to other people. I caused them to lose out on opportunities that they really did deserve. But because I was feeling some kind of way and I was in my feelings, I did some things that were dirty that I shouldn't have done that were dirty. So, if we'll be honest, there are people that owe you some apologies, and there's probably one or two people this year that you owe an apology to. So we all have work to do. All right, we all have work to do. I am going to open it up. I'm going to open up the lines for some conversation, and we're going to chop it up. If you want to join us for that conversation, we are on IG Live. I am going to end the broadcast here on YouTube. Thank you so much for your time and attention. If you hop over to IG, the page is Daring Dialogues, all one word. We are there live, and we're going to continue this conversation. Thank you for tuning in. Be well, and most importantly, be light.